At the Capitol, the budget deadline is right around the corner. We'll review the big items in these one-house budgets from the state legislature, how they differ from the governor's plan, and will we have an on-time budget after all? Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Jamie is off this week. We're just over 2 weeks away from the April 1st deadline now to pass the New York State budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The state Senate and the Assembly releasing their one-house budgets this week, meaning the official negotiations will now begin. These budgets are a rebuttal to the governor's executive budget. However, neither budget included major changes to the governor's spending plan. They did, however, include some differences, particularly on discovery reform, involuntary commitment, and the rebate check proposal. One thing lawmakers left out was any change to the timeline for the state's consumer-directed personal assistance program, or what's known as CDPAP transition. That move has faced a backlash from caregivers and the patients who rely on Medicaid's home care program. They're concerned about losing services in the process of reapplying by April 1st. The state says patients will be able to give and keep their caregivers, but the changes are going to save taxpayer money. Joining us now to give additional insight on these one-house budgets, Blair Horner, Executive Director at NYPIRG, and Patrick Orecki, the Director of the State Studies at Citizens Budget Commission. Hope we got both those titles right.
That's right.
I'll toss it out, whoever wants to take it first. One-house budgets, it happens every year. Are these individual budgets anything like each other, or like the governor's, or pretty close?
Yeah, they're fairly similar to one another, which you typically see with legislative one-house budget proposals, that they come in the same direction in a lot of policies. So we see that here. The starting point that they came from with the governor's proposal, spending a lot of money, means that the legislature adding a few $1 billion on top of that as well really makes these big spending plans.
Yeah, in some ways the difference is just sort of conceptually. The Assembly's budget tends to be more focused on money and less on policy. The Senate side, you get a lot more policy action. Of course, money too. I mean, to Patrick's point, both houses are going to spend more than the governor proposed, so it's a lot of dough.
Does she have to figure out whatever she proposes, no matter how big the number is, they're going to want to add to it? Because it's not that you're buying votes, but certain members want certain things, and hey, I'll go for this thing, but I want this for my district, that kind of stuff?
I mean, it's sort of a dance that goes on for as long as I've been watching these budgets. Governors come in a little bit low because they know the legislature is going to want to add, so everybody looks like heroes when it's over. And sometimes there's an actual game in terms of policy. So, for example, the governor every year cuts the legislative adds to higher education, so-called opportunity programs, and the legislature adds it back. Everyone knows the dance step on that. It plays out that way every year. This year, the governor, though, I think he added some of the legislative money in advance in terms of the dance moves.
Yeah, and that's the nature of being the executive versus a legislator, too. The executive is often the bad cop in some of the big programs, like Medicaid or school aid, offers some savings proposals to start. There's not as much of that in this year's budget. So the legislative adds that come on top of that are really member-driven or specific district-driven, they really bring up that spending total.
And the ad this year, which has happened in the last few years, is there tends to be more money, right? So the governor's estimates on her budget in January look a little bit different than the revenues for the state by the time March rolls around. And so this year they all agreed that there was going to be another $500 to $1 billion in extra money that they could spend. So that helps sort of grease the wheels, so to speak, at the end.
It seems every year, though, no matter how much money, no matter how much it goes up, the same usual suspects are shaking the tin cup on the stairs saying, it's not enough, guys. We need more money for fill in the blank.
Yeah, you know, we also advocate, Blair and I, too. We have our positions that we advocate for. The thing that everyone shares when they're lobbying or advocating in Albany is that none of our wish lists have a bottom. There's always something else that we could ask for. So, of course, that's always going to be part of the equation. Yeah.
So no one's calling her up saying, we look at we don't need this much. You can take back $1 million.
Only if it's regard to Channel 10.
Exactly. What struck me, too, at budgets, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong. I've been doing this 30, 40 years. I don't remember so many issues that seem to have nothing to do with a budget being in the budget. Is that a newer thing, or has that always been the case, where I'm not passing the budget unless you approve this thing, which, again, has it holds the whole budget up, but if it's a controversial issue.
Yeah, when you were young, John, it was a little bit different. There have been some court cases that have strengthened the governor's hand with regard to how budgets get put together. One of the reasons why they're not as late as they used to be. But also having the governor having this leverage in the budget process allows her to advance policy initiatives in the budget. And so that sort of has its own sort of snowballing effect with regard to the legislature. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, the Assembly tends to say, well, at least in our one-house budget, we're not going to really address policy as a way to give them some leverage in negotiations over the policy initiatives that will inevitably be in the budget.
Right. Is there also, if I was cynical, I almost think that sometimes you're talking about earlier this dance they do, where I remember one lawmaker years ago, I asked about an issue and he said, oh, we're going to pass that, but they're going to drag their feet and lobbyists will throw money at them like, hey, please don't do this to us this year. And then in the end, they land where they were going to land the whole time. But I guess that's a cynical view, right? That this is all about churning the money tree and, getting some lobbying money.
You want to tackle that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the budget is a mammoth document. It's thousands of pages of statutory changes and narrative that goes with it. So there's a ton of transactional, negotiations that will go on. And it's different in the non-budget part of a legislative session where generally most bills move individually. They're kind of debated one by one, with the exception of things that, in Albany speak, we refer to as a big ugly bill, where this happens maybe again at the end of session too. So these big kind of omnibus type of packages can have a lot of trading going on.
Yeah, those big uglies are like a vampire, only come out at night, don't they? Those be 4 a.m. when you find out 3 months later, when did that happen? They go, oh, that was 2 a.m.
And sometimes the legislators don't even know. But to your cynical point earlier, there is a lot of campaign fundraising that happens around the time they're doing the budget. And I can remember a few years ago when Governor Cuomo had his head of the division of the budget with him at a dinner, and he was just there for the free meal. But the lobbyists, they were definitely forking it over, so to speak.
I bet, not just the steak. Last 30 seconds, do you think they get this thing done on time, or is it going to go a little late? A little late's not a big deal, right?
What's your prediction, Patrick?
I think the difficult thing will be funding the MTA, which is an issue that basically isn't on the table in writing yet. And what happens with the MTA will determine if it's on time or not.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more closer to on time than it's been in the last few years. And some of that's driven by what's happening in Washington. Like if you're Albany, you want to get your budget done before whatever Washington does what they're going to do, because it's, you don't want to have to make cuts that you don't necessarily have to make until you see what the feds are going to do to the state.
Right, but if it goes too late, then you start messing with everybody else's budgets at the local level, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Blair Horner, Patrick Gorecki, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, John.
We'll see both of you. We'll see how it turns out. The governor proposing a measure to help kids pay attention better in the classroom. When we come back, we'll be hearing from the Teachers Union president on the reaction to this proposed bell-to-bell cell phone ban. Also, if you have a comment or story idea, please tell us about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We're also on X, what some people still call Twitter, at WTEN. And welcome back to Empire State Weekly. The governor continuing to push for distraction-free learning environments, proposing a bell-to-bell cell phone ban. The governor proposed a statewide ban on the use of cell phones and other personal electronic devices during the school day. In her State of the State address back in January, a number of local districts have already put their own restrictions in place. They report seeing face-to-face interactions increase. Opponents of the ban argue that taking phones away from the students limits their ability to contact parents if there's an emergency. Joining us now to give additional insight and reaction to the proposed cell phone ban, Melinda Person, the president of the New York State United Teachers. Melinda, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I read somewhere, I'm sure it's accurate, the NYSUT is in favor of this, correct?
Yes, we are big supporters of the governor's bell-to-bell phone-free schools initiative. It is something that we've been hearing as a challenge from our members in schools for years, and we are really excited that this year we hope to actually get something done to address it.
Is the problem that bad where people who haven't been inside of a classroom in 20 years, they think, what's the big deal? You tell them to put the cell phones away. and that's it. Why is that approach not working? Explain that part to me.
I think it's a challenge that even goes beyond our classrooms. The focus on youth mental health in this moment right now, we have seen an overwhelming body of research showing the connection between social media and other platforms like that, and their impact on our students' anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. There is so much evidence now that shows us the damage that these platforms are doing to our children and to our students, that it's really time that we begin to address it, not just in our schools, but holistically as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, fortunately or unfortunately, you only get them from maybe 8 to 2 or so. So if that's the issue, they've got a lot of other time where they have access to these phones. What do you say to the parents who say, look, my child is very respectful, they do what they're told, and I just want my child to have that phone. I just, if I want to get a hold of them, if they want to get a hold of me, especially if they've got concerns going on with all the stuff happening in schools, unfortunately, with violence, I want them to be able to reach me. How do you respond to the parent who's worried about that?
So I would say first and foremost, the governor's proposal does allow students to have, non-internet enabled devices. So parents could text or call their kids in an emergency if they feel that that's really important. We also, for those of us who went to school several decades ago, parents can also call the office and reach their kids when the child forgets their violin, or there's a change to the pickup schedule. We do not necessarily need to have kids online with access to Snapchat and TikTok and all of the other distractions during the school day. Our students are there to learn and to interact with each other, to build those social skills that come from being with their peers and with other adults. And so by giving our students, 7 hours a day without those distractions, we are really giving them the space to learn, to grow, to thrive. And for a lot of these kids, we're giving them their childhood back, because these distractions, the access that kids have to content online these days is not like when we were kids. And we really want to step in and protect our kids during the school day from these distractions so they can do what they're there to do, which is to learn.
Are you hearing this as well from your teachers and your administrators, that they want this as well? It's not just the union, it's the rank and file members?
Oh, yes. Our members have, in an average classroom, if a student has a cell phone in their pocket, our members are trying to teach Shakespeare and they're competing with TikTok, right? It's not a fair fight. And these devices are intentionally addictive. So we're not even blaming the kids for not putting them down. They have been designed to pull our students' attention away from the outside world. So by creating some space, having the phones in their locker or in their backpack, we create some space for our kids to actually focus on the real world around them.
I saw during COVID, there were some, and it wasn't a widespread thing, but sometimes you'd see a video go viral where a student was recording an interaction with a teacher, or a teacher pushing maybe an agenda, maybe they should or shouldn't have been. I imagine there's some cynical folks out there thinking this is a way of silencing those phones where the parents won't know what's going on in the classroom and they don't want things being recorded. How would you react to that? Is that just a silly argument, or do you not want those phones out recording things?
I would say it's been actually a much more of a challenge with the use of phones with cyberbullying of other students. We see students taking inappropriate photos of other students, posting them online, sometimes anonymously, and it's really gotten out of control because, in my day, the bullying ended when you went home from school. Now these posts are online and get shared virally. And the impact that it's having on our students' mental health is really astronomical. So that is the biggest challenge that we've seen, is the cyberbullying and the use of phones to film fights in the hallway, things like that, which then encourages more of the same activity and more disciplinary problems for administrators. So, obviously out in public, being filmed is always something that we have to be concerned with, but mostly we've seen it as a challenge with cyberbullying.
And last question for the last minute. Do you feel like, on the positive side, I remember when, I'm old enough to remember when seatbelts became a thing. But, I shouldn't have to, you can't tell me to click a seatbelt. And there was a big pushback. And, within a couple of years, people were like, I don't even think about it anymore. I just put the belt on and I drive. Do you have a feeling with this, once we get this really across the board and in place, a year, 2 years from now, it's not going to be a big deal?
100%. In places where they have gone phone free for the school day, they report that they have a couple of months of adjustment where kids have to sort of relearn the expectations and parents relearn the expectations. And then almost universally, they report an improved school climate and culture, lower mental health referrals, less disciplinary referrals, test scores go up, kids start reading more, taking more books out of the library. I mean, by almost every metric, even absenteeism, which is a major problem in our schools right now. All of these things have improved in places where they have gone phone free.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Melinda Person, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it today.
Thank you.
All right. The corrections officers strike ending with another tentative agreement and many officers being fired. When we come back, we'll break down the deal that ended the strike and the next steps for the COs who say it still does not address their main concerns. By the way, if you have a story idea for us, please tell us about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We're also on X at WTEN. Welcome back. The corrections officers strike that impacted facilities across the state coming to an end, according to the Department of Corrections. Officials saying that they will implement several measures meant to address safety concerns, things that caused the strike. The HALT Act, which had been a major source of concern, will have some parts of it suspended for 90 days. After that, a committee will then reassess. According to the docs, a plan has also been developed to keep facilities staffed without requiring 24-hour shifts.
We will maintain our prisons utilizing 12-hour shifts to ensure that people aren't working 24-hour shifts and begin to slowly reopen and get back to a new normal.
According to the commissioner, the department has about 10,000 officers able to work. That's about 3,500 fewer compared to before the strike. The National Guard will continue to help staff these prisons. They will gradually be withdrawn as the state hires new corrections officers. The governor also announcing this week that the state will not be rehiring those corrections officers who got laid off now as part of the strike. An order directing all state agencies not to hire anybody who took part in the strike. Local laws that allow workers' civil service title to be transferred to a local agency, those are temporarily suspended for the fired workers. State leaders previously said COs who did not return to work could face criminal or a civil penalty. A local attorney says he's unsure if the governor's order is going to hold up in court.
Where the governor's office, in my opinion, is going to run into issues is being on strike considered to be engaging in misconduct?
The strike considered illegal because of what's known as the Taylor Law, which bans public employees in New York State from going on strike in the first place. In economic news, financial uncertainty on Wall Street is not just a problem for investors and retirees, but could mean cuts to city services. Our correspondent Henry Rossoff has details.
Turbulent times on Wall Street could lead to tough times for the city of New York. So I pressed the mayor about the potential of budget cuts impacting services New Yorkers rely on.
Is that keeping you up at night right now?
So we have to face these uncertainties, and the council is going to have to sit down with us based on the economic outlook and make the smart decisions to balance our budget. And that's what we're going to do.
Mayor Eric Adams cited his stewardship of the city's finances during the migrant crisis, which led to improvements in the municipal credit rating, even while facing billions in unexpected expenses. But during the migrant crisis, the mayor had originally proposed big cuts before walking them back. I asked if he's already talking to his team about more cuts this time around, like cuts to summer youth employment or future NYPD classes.
We're going to still lean into our Summer Rising program. We're going to still do those things that low-income New Yorkers need to get through, through this fiscal crisis.
City Council Finance Chair Justin Brannan says he's leery of what the mayor will and will not propose in this potential moment of crisis.
Every year it seems like they have a new excuse, whether it was COVID, whether it was the migrant crisis. We're not going to allow them to, use the chaos coming from Trump as a reason to cut essential services, and that's what we're focused on.
The council has fought high-profile battles with the mayor in recent years over library funding, housing vouchers, and early childhood education. Brannan says any decisions made now will be difficult because of all the uncertainty around the Trump administration's trade policies and budget cuts.
The chaos and cruelty coming from Washington is just erratic, and it's impossible to predict. So we just have to protect ourselves and negotiate a good budget that delivers for working people.
Henry Rossoff in New York City. Stick around, back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. And by the way, if you have a comment or story idea, please tell us about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We are also on X at WTEN. Finally, in Empire State Weekly, friends and loved ones are saying goodbye to a longtime civil rights advocate, Hazel Dukes, at a funeral this week in Harlem. Called Mama Dukes by those who knew her well, she was considered a trailblazer in her decades of work in the state. I want to leave you today with this week's Governor Hochul's words from the funeral as she spoke on the legacy Mama Dukes leaves behind.
And I said, Mama Dukes, I will carry on that fight. I will be your voice as we take on all the insanity coming out of Washington, the chaos, the attacks on our people, on our health care, Medicare, Social Security, our children, our education, child care. I will be there to take on the fight. So I am even more motivated and feel morally compelled to channel her voice, as everyone in this room does as well. This is a moral responsibility on all of our shoulders.